Good evening, everyone, and you're very welcome to this event, the North-West Multi-Modal Transport Hub. Please be aware, a bit of housekeeping, that this webinar is being recorded and you'll be in a listen-only mode. The overall session will last for approximately 60 minutes. There will be about 45 minutes of knowledge share, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. You can submit your questions via the chat or questions panel during the webinar, preferably by the questions panel, and we'll be able to address those to the panel at the end on your behalf. Following the webinar, the recording will be uploaded onto our APM YouTube account, and the slides will be published on our APM SlideShare account. Both of these are listed on the branch community page on the APM website, and that'll take about 5 working days. This session can count towards your CPD. So, by way of overview, it's been a long-term aspiration for the APM Northern Ireland branch to hold an event in the Northwest. And this particular event had originally been intended as a site visit in 2019. Unfortunately, that was deferred by COVID, but fortunately it allows us to broadcast the event to a wider audience. It's a £27.5 million strategic transport project, EU funded, led by TransLink and supported by the Department for Infrastructure, Derry and Strabane Council and Donegal County Council. It's a complex multidisciplinary project with many key stakeholder groups. Presenters from TransLink tonight are Gary McCluskey, a Senior Programme Manager, Lisa McFadden, a Project Manager, and Paul Denvir, a Project Manager. Each of those will introduce themselves and speak in turn about their role. So I'm very much looking forward to this evening's presentation, and please do submit any questions via the questions section of this site, and look forward to fielding those questions at the end. Over to you, panel. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Katherine says, my name is Gary McCluskey. I'm a Senior Programme Manager within TransLink's Property Department. I started this project off as a project manager back in 2010. And here we are tonight, 10 or 11 years later. The station has been relocated and the project has been complete. So this evening is about giving you all an overview of the project journey to get us here. So I'll just start to go through the presentation then now. So the agenda then for tonight is I'm speaker 1, and I'll give you the project background and the overview. When I'm finished, then I'll pass over to Lisa McFadden, who will take us through the construction phase 1. And then following on from that, Paul Denvir will take us through the construction phase 2. There'll be a flyover and walk through the building then as part of Paul's presentation, and then following on from that, we'll have a Q&A session. So just to give you a bit of background then, to give you an understanding really of the lay of the land really, I suppose, around the site. We have included this slide. So this was the infrastructure and the buildings before we started any of the works. So if I can just move my cursor around the screen there. If any of you know Derry, this is the Duke Street roundabout. This is Duke Street heading up towards the Craigavon Bridge, and then this is Waterside Link heading up towards Eglinton. So you can see this is the old listed building that wasn't within our ownership whenever we started the project. This was the park and ride then adjacent to the old listed building that we did own. This was the forecourt to the front of the old station, and again that wasn't within our ownership. We had down at the back on the left hand side here, you can see that's a permanent way railway track yard, and the only way to get access to that was through the park and ride, which wasn't ideal, and then down through a set of gates here. Looking over towards the right hand side of this, you can see the old station as it was, with all these sort of permanent roofs. You can then see this was an island platform with line 1 Wait till my cursor catches up here. Oh, move. Here we go. With line 1 running up along here next to the River Foyle, and line 2, you can actually see the 3-car sets in there. This was the S&T, the Signalling and Telecoms relay room, and then this was the remains of an old tank farm that we had up there at the time, which led to a bit of contamination in and around this part of the site. And then you can see there's an old siding coming into that area then as well. So that's just, as I say, an overview of the site before we started any of the work. So I'll just give you a bit of project history and a timeline here now. So in 2010, TransLink were approached by ILACS to commission a joint study on the future location of the train station. At that stage, there was no huge big aspirations for us to relocate the train station anywhere, but we did jointly commission that study with ILACS, which then led on to us in 2011 initiating a project mandate. And then we appointed a number of designers at that stage to prepare a few outline designs just to see where the best location would be. And as a result of that, then we come up with a number of options, which we took out then to public consultation in the latter part of 2012, early 2013. So then that led on, following the public consultation, and that led on to us looking into establishing what we'll call it a proper project, where we set up then the program sponsorship group in 14-15, and then in 2015, then we appointed a fully integrated design team. 2006, then we submitted an outline business case for £27.5 million, and we got approval for that. Funding partners within that then included the EU's INTERREG VA programme, the Department for Infrastructure, Department for Transport, Tourism, Sport, and Derry City and Strabane District Council provided an additional £500,000 for a new Errington Greenway. And then in 2016, in December of that year, we actually purchased the old Waterside train station building. Detailed design then commenced following that, where we could go in and properly do the surveys throughout the building and get a good understanding of what we were actually dealing with. And then in that same year, we also then kicked off the PQQ process for the main contractors. In 2016, then we also carried out a further public consultation. I have another slide later on in the presentation just that looks at some of that. And in March 2017, then we actually lodged the planning application, and in May 2018, permission was finally granted. It was a bit of a challenging planning application. And then following the appointment of the main contractor, then works started on site in July 2018. So just looking at the project brief then, what the project was setting out to achieve. We were looking for a modern fit-for-purpose railway station to meet projected passenger numbers. At that stage, there was just over 300,000 footfall. And then we wanted to better that to just over 600,000. And the current facilities that we had at that time were fairly poor and fairly limited. During peak times, passengers actually had to queue outside the station to get in. There was a fairly awkward arrangement too for coming off the train, and you couldn't go back through the building, you had to come out through a night gate. So we wanted a new refurbished and extended platforms to go with that then as well. So platform 1, we wanted it to accommodate a 9-car set. Platform 2 then to accommodate a 6-car set, and we wanted new canopies on the new platforms then as well. Also, there was the bus sat-down layoff area at the station for passengers arriving and departing the railway station, 3 number bus stands, a new railway siding to stable a 9-car train set, a new runaround railway loop for steam trains, new track works, which we know as Permanent Way, which was about 2 kilometres or so. Sorry, that's not actually right. It says from Fovle Bridge. It's not. Railway Signaling and Telecoms, which was from the Fovle Bridge, which was associated then with a new track layout and new station and platforms, etc. There was a requirement then for us to look at introducing, including in the new scheme, the railway infrastructure for the Embankment tourist train, and also then increase the number of park and ride spaces that we currently had, which was fairly limited if you remember back to the previous slide. We also then wanted to look at sustainability and renewable technologies throughout the scheme, and a passenger sat-down area and taxi rank, cycle storage, and then a BDA compliant facility. Very big scope there. So looking then at the old station and the historical background of that. On this image up here, you can see in the top left-hand side, that was the original station in all its glory. It was built for the northern counties in and around the 1870s, designed by John Lanyon. And you can see then this image up here to the right-hand side, you can see the central part of that building was bombed. It actually bombed a couple of times in the 1970s. And then there was you can see images of it later on, and there was an infill curtain wall and piece put into that. And then the station was actually closed in 1980, and that's when we moved out of that building and moved across to the smaller station that I showed you in the overall side aerial photo that I showed you earlier there. And it was converted then to a retail warehouse. It actually was a carpet warehouse. There was also a radio station in there too. And all the internal railway tracks and platforms and artefacts had been removed. We were fairly sort of disappointed the first few times we were in there. We were sort of expecting to see some old railway artefacts or some of the old some of the old conservation items, cornices or whatever it was, but all of that had gone. It was all just sort of circular offices, really. So it was fairly bare. And then you can see down in the bottom right-hand side that image in the original station itself, there was 2 lines and a siding that came inside the building. You can see here, and then there was these 2 railway platforms on each side of the building. On the right-hand side here, which is the eastern elevation, it actually was open. That wasn't closed in at all. So this is pre-construction, and you can see the state of the building and the parking. And as I've noted there, the building was listed on HED's buildings at risk register. So you can see here, this was the blue infill curtain walling part that I mentioned there that was erected following the bomb. So as I say, you can see all these 2 bits on each side of that are the original clock tower that all still existed. So, but it was just in a poor state of repair. Again, you can see the front here, and that's all the old original stonework for this new infill bit that was put in following the bomb. This is an internal photograph then, as it was. I don't know if you can clearly see or not, but there's actually a sign down in that gable wall that says whatever the name of the company was, Flooring. And I think they put in this little sort of pod in there too. But you can see just all of the original trusses were still there, all the original sark and all the original timber purlins, roof light, that was all still there. You can see down the left-hand side then there was this facing brick wall, and with these arches, which if you just walk to the top here, look at this central photograph, you can see these were the original windows and doors. They had all been filled in and blocked up, and say in the facing brick, then painted over. So sort of knew in behind that there was a nice original wall just waiting to be discovered. So then you can see here on this elevation, that's the side of the park and ride. You can see the bicycle shelter then too. Parking was horrendous around here. In fact, a few times I went up and seen 2 cars parked in the bicycle shelter there. And you can see just the state of the elevation there. And then if you look at this central photograph here, you can see just there was cars that were illegally parking, driving up over the footpath and up onto the forecourt of the old station. You can see here in that top right-hand corner, I counted 25 cars parked in there one day. And then you can see this is the back elevation that was open, you've seen that on the previous slide. And this is where the trains and the platforms used to come into the building there. So it was definitely in need of a lot of work. So then this is photographs that we had of the railway infrastructure along the River Fowle. So you wouldn't actually know that the Fowle River was in behind any of this at all. There was a total disconnect between the area and the river. So you can see then in this top right hand photograph, you can see this was the original station, same with the river and behind that. So there was all these lovely views that were just waiting to be discovered just whenever we took all of this down. You can see again, this was the original, on the bottom right photograph, you can see this was the original infrastructure with the tracks and signalling, and that's what I was showing you earlier on the aerial photograph with signs running there. So this was all completely cut off from the public. And then this bottom left-hand photograph here, that is just at the entrance into the old original station. I literally turned left there and took a photograph of that. You can see these advertising boards, and there's sort of these large trees, and you can see the train parked in there as well. So there was a complete disconnect between any sort of public space and the river itself. So looking then at the overall project team organisational structure, so just sort of starting from the top then and working our way down, there was at the top there was the investment decision maker, which is TransLink's executive team. And then there was the SRO then that sat below that reported back into the executive. We had a couple of different SROs during the duration of the project. Clive Bradbury was the infrastructure executive, so Clive started it off, and then it was handed over to John Glass, who is the current Director of Infrastructure and Projects within TransLink. And then under that, there was, you can see the program manager and project manager there. Them roles changed a few times. As I was saying, I started off as the project manager, and then I became the program manager. And Lisa and Paul then took on the project manager roles. We had the senior suppliers then as part of the overall project then as well. So senior suppliers for this project would have been the likes of the head of signalling, the head of permanent way, property, mechanical, electrical, feeding in then to the overall standards and technical designs that needed to be signed off. And then they had various technical groups feeding into them. Over here then we also then had the senior users, which again for this particular project was more our operational colleagues on the rail and also on the bus side. And any of the actual users within the facility itself. And again, then they had their own user groups feeding into them. And then sitting outside of that, we had the project assurance then from the P3O office. And then under the project manager, we had the supply chain and team managers. It's just worth noting here then as well. Put in here just there was this was a project that sat within an overall program for the North-West Multi-Modal Transport Hub. And the program board members for that were the Department for Infrastructure, and they were the overall program SRO, the Department for Transport, Tourism and Sport in the South. There was obviously yourselves. There was Derry City and Strabane District Council, as well as Donegal County Council, and Sustrans then also sat on that program board as as well. So we just included a synopsis just of the rolled up project schedule. I'll not go through this in any great detail because it's sort of mentioned earlier in the project history and the timeline. But you can just see there in the various stages, like conception, as I was saying earlier, started back in November 2010. Feasibility then started in November 13, ran on for a while. And then the appraisal, the outline business case and letter of offer was in and around 2016. As I was saying, we purchased the land then December 16 and started the design stage really within sort of late 16, 17. And we procured the contractor then and had them on board just at the end of 18. And then I'll not go into the rest of that just because it'll be happening on leases and Paul's tools later on in the presentation. Just looking at the procurement strategy that we agreed on for the professional services. As Katherine was saying in her introduction, this was a huge multidisciplinary team with an awful lot of elements within it. So the procurement strategy identified an integrated design team approach to manage multiple professional services. There was a two-stage procurement process, PQQs and ITTs. It started off from principal competition and then went on to secondary. So McDonald then were appointed as the integrated design team economic operator. And the decision was made at the time that we wanted as many professional services within that, the overall IDT team as possible. And that even included then all the surveys that were associated with planning applications and building control and whatever else was needed just to get a fully detailed package to the main contractors and then to tender. So as I say, McDonald were the overall design team leaders. They carried out structural, civil engineering, mechanical and electrical engineering, S&T designs, up to group stage 4, permanent way designers. They were the NEC 3PM. They were also the NEC site supervisors. They carried out the Novo Devo, it was their sister company, MRA. And then their sub-consultants were Consort Design Group, were the overall architects and conservation architects in the scheme, brought a wealth of conservation knowledge and expertise to the whole listed station. Paul Hogarth and company were the landscape architects, Turley's were the planning consultants, Hoyt Owen traffic engineers, SDS Energy were the BREEAM assessors, and the ecologist was Spencer Ecology. We then appointed quantity surveyors, independent, directly to TransLink to sit outside the integrated design team. So we ran a secondary competition from an existing QS framework, and we appointed JCP consultant. And as I say, they carried out the cost management services right from the beginning to agreeing the final account with the contractor. So both the IDT and the QS were appointed under the NEC3 professional services contract option A activity schedule. And then the S&T designs, moving on from McDonald on the group 4 was Babcock International. So we appointed them from an existing framework under an NEC professional services contract option D, cost reimbursable. Was just looking then at the design concepts whenever we get the design team appointed. I think there was everybody's, the first option that we looked at was bringing the trains back inside the refurbished building, just as we were looking at in some of them old original photographs. So you can see these two red lines here represent the two railway lines, and you can just see then the platforms on each side of that. And then these grey boxes here, in each side of the red lines, then represent the platforms internally. You can see then the very front of the building where that number 1 bubble is, you can see just how much of the building then remained for us to try and get the requirements of a multimodal transport hub within that area. So that was the first option that we looked at, and there was a lot of issues with it. So we then moved on here to look at another option. So this was option 2, where we were keeping the platforms alongside the building and keeping the trains and platforms outside. So you can see there where my cursor is, this was the proposed island platform, with that red line was railway line 1, and this was line 2. So it obviously then terminated here, and line 2 ran up the side of that. And then as part of this option, then we were proposing to come in through the side of the building here, and that allowed us to open up and use the whole footprint of that building, and incorporate the entire requirements for multimodal transport hub within that footprint, without having to go back to option 1 and looking at having to stick on other extensions and things right around the rest of the building. So we considered them and appraised them both. So I'll go on to the next slide. So this, oh, I went too far. Sorry, just go back here. So looking then at the final design layout, as we saying then, this is the old station that we were going to refurb. You see there in bubble 2, that's the platform, and then these are the 2 lines coming in. You'd see area 3 there, that's the new park and ride that was coming in at the side of the platforms. You see area 5 there, so that's the station square and public realm area. And then 4 is the passenger sat down point and taxi spaces. So the idea here being that this is where the old train station sat, was located, and then the island platform came up along here, and the photographs I was showing you earlier showed the railway lines coming up this area. And as I say, there was the whole disconnect of this river frontage. So as part of this scheme, then we wanted to open up all of this then as much as we could. So that then gave us the opportunity to incorporate a bus turning circle here beside the station, which we never had before, because you could never take buses in here because there was nowhere to turn them. So there was an awkward sort of single lane entry here to the front of the old station, which wasn't great. So sort of during peak times with high passenger numbers, there might have been 2 or 3 buses sitting around here and having to block up this road. And then it allowed us then to look at an entry into the site with this internal turning area. It being that you can come in here and turn, and passengers can be dropped off or picked up without having to go in and block up the whole of the park and ride. And then this green dotted line here was then the idea, that was the route for the Greenway. So it was connecting into the existing Greenway infrastructure. So this is coming down from the Craigavon Bridge direction, along the waterfront there, coming down here along the front of the station, down along the side, and then we were creating this new Greenway at the bottom of that embankment, running along, elevated from the railway lines here beside it. So you were getting good views walking down there out over the River Fowle. So that's just the same thing. This is just an aerial image of this, just presented slightly different. You can see the bus turning circle there. You can see this is the refurbished building. You can see this is the Greenway going down along the edge of the river, up along the front of the station, down along the side, and then continuing down just at the foot of that embankment. And then you can see, just about see there, this is where the new 6-car set train would sit along the side of the building, and this is the new park and ride, and then that's the internal turning area with the set down points there. As I was saying, this is a Grade B listed building, so we were fairly constrained in what we could do here. So we had to keep all of the external walls as they were. So there was the external envelope of the building, pretty much with the exception of this front infill bit, is all as it was. We just cleaned it up and repointed and fixed windows and did things like that. So the design is that we were keeping the active travel towards the front so that people could come in and out of there without having to go in through the main part of the building. When you enter, then we located the cafe here to maximise the views out over the River Fovle. So you can see over to the city side, there's the food prep area, and then this is all back of house for NIR staff, because we need direct access in and out of the platforms then for obvious reasons. And then down here we have the toilets. We have the disabled toilet there. We have a parent changing room. We have a change in places toilet, male, female. And again, there's another active travel unit there with direct access out onto the Greenway. And then we have this huge big area down at the back of the building where we included 2 internal planters. And you'll see some of the photographs of that later on in Lisa's presentation. And then there's a big area down at the back here that is used as a passenger waiting area, but then can also be converted into an area for any public events. And it's got flexibility in terms of services and water and power and electric and things. And so, as I say, that can be used, and just before COVID was been fairly well used actually. And then we've got then these set of 3 doors here, just with direct access out onto the Greenway. So this is the overall layout then for the Greenway path itself. As it was shown earlier, that's it coming down at the back, and the new bus turning circle up along the front of the building, down along the side, down along the bottom of that embankment to the Waterside link road, and then right up here, and then it connects into the existing Greenway there in front of Abrington. So we were able to move the Greenway away from where it was, which was up at the top of the dual carriageway there, Waterside link. Just moving on then to look at there was a huge amount of public and stakeholder consultation carried out within this scheme. This was a fairly sensitive project, and there was an awful lot of interest in it in the North-West area. So as I mentioned earlier, in 2013 we carried out a public consultation, and we got almost 1,500 responses. 92% of the respondents were supportive of the implementation of a new train station. 64% of the respondents were in favour of refurbishing the old vacant station. We included 4 overall options within that public consultation. One of them was to refurbish the old station, not the original, but the one that we actually demolished here that I was showing you earlier, to build a new. The other one then was a new contemporary option. And then there was another elevated option over the top of the railway lines, just at the side of the Waterside link dual carriageway. But by far, the refurbishment of the old vacant station building came out as the most favourable option. In 2016 then to January 17, as was mentioned earlier, we carried out another full public consultation on the preferred option that we were going to submit to planning. And 98% again supported the principle of a new North-West Multi-Modal Transport Hub, with 92% agreeing that it was appropriate to reuse and refurbish the former Waterside train station. And then again in 2018 in June, there was a third public consultation which carried out with various interested parties, including lobby groups, community groups, politicians, etc. Just to run through some of the final details and get opinion just on the final designs before we commence the construction on site. So just to give you a feel then of some of the stakeholders and interested groups that we consulted with, there was the Department of Environment, Historic Environments Division for the listed building, Chamber of Commerce, there's council committees, Fovle Civic Trust, Derry City Centre Initiative, Ministerial Advisory Group, NIR Passengers, Environmental Health, INTERREG, Royal National Institute of Blind People, Ulster Architectural Heritage Society, elected representatives, Sustrans, Planning Service, Transport NI, and Into the West Lobby Group, to mention but a few. So I've just included some of the photographs around there. You can see just the amount of consultation that was done at the time. So just moving on then, this is my last slide, just in terms of the procurement strategy for the works. So for the construction works then, we went with a traditional procurement route. We ruled out a design and build option, given the conservation nature of the works. The principal contractor took overall responsible for the coordination and management of the works, which included conservation, heritage building, civil engineering, mechanical and electrical engineering, permanent way and track works, ground remediation, public realm, park and ride, and Abington Greenway. And then they also coordinated the S&T, the Babcock guys. So following a two-stage procurement exercise, TransLink appointed Farns, Romberg, Sersa, JV as the principal contractor, and the former contract was an NEC3 engineering and construction. Option B, bill of quantities, allowing for remeasurement. And then on the signalling and telecoms side of things, TransLink appointed Babcock International from an existing framework agreement, and Babcock were appointed under an NEC3 engineering and construction contract option A activity schedule. So that just brings me nicely into the start of the construction works on site, phase one, and this is where I will hand over to Lisa McFadden.
Thank you, Gary, and good evening to everyone. So I'm going to give a short overview on the construction phase when I worked on as project manager. So this was really from October 2018 to October 2019 when we commissioned phase one and went into operational use. So I'm just going to pause and reflect on the current slide on the screen, because I think it's fair to say that this was a restoration job as well as a project for TransLink as well as a transport project. The building in the PWay, as Gary just touched on, was delivered by Farns and Romberg Sersha. The construction works involved restoration to the highest standards for all the key elements of the listed building, and also introduced new contemporary elements that you probably can see from the coloured glazing to the front. The 1980s insertion with modern glazing at the front with art at the backdrop helped showcase that this is a modern transport hub for today's use. Also, through inception stage, there was changes such as new legislation or new standards of way of doing things. So, for example, we introduced a change in places. Also, we looked at to retain the modern elements that we had to provide for fit for use for today. And this include like retail opportunities like a cafe overlooking the River Foyle and the city beyond. And what we touched on earlier is a key feature was a flexible community space within the passenger area at the back of the station. It also had to be a sustainable building. You know, restoration buildings tend to be difficult, and I think that was definitely seen throughout the construction phase. But it also needs to start to look after itself, and that's generating revenue through retail space. But also we included a ground source heat pumps, solar panels, and rainwater harvesting tanks, so the building could take care of itself into the future. But I suppose the glory of this building is the restoration work. Stonework cleaning, repairs and repointing was carried out. Front blocks, including repairs to decorative carved sections and mouldings. The finish of any replacement of Peakmore stone matches the tooling techniques that when this building was originally built. And taking the sandstone and the granite all back to its former glory. It wasn't always easy because there was a lot of stone repairs, significant time in the programme for sandstone columns and coins replacement. So we very much had to carefully balance with the programme and the cost the whole way through. The glazed roof light, which runs the whole length, is original in the shed and has been repaired. A new double glazed roof glazing inserted into the original structure, flooding the place with natural light when you go into the building. That will be seen later on when Paul takes us through the walkthrough. The original windows and doorways along the west elevation facing the River Foyle have been opened up to allow views. And this involved removing painstakingly paint from existing brickwork, internally to reveal the original colours and patterns of the bricks and arches, and taken back to the former glory. I suppose in one way, everybody had a great love for this building. And internally, it can be seen that how we tried to mix the blend with the old with the new. And I suppose it was a team effort. And Gary has taken us through as well. Like, we very much had technical meetings every month, monthly progress meetings, on-site meetings with the conservation architect, really driving results and making those decisions quicker to meet the construction programme, which was had quite minimal float. The original clock faces in the tower were badly corroded, so you can see there in the top right and in the further smaller pictures, and need to be taken out and restored by specialists. The clock is fully operational, but one of the unfortunate things, the original bells or chimes were not in the clock tower, but we put a mechanical in, and once again it chimes in the northwest. Unfortunately, her budget wasn't to George and John Ferguson, who constructed it, for a cost of 5,000 before. But I think overall what we delivered is a restoration and a transpiration project that's fit for use. And we're just going to take you through different phases now as well. So here we have got a platform, and also as a project manager, one of my roles is to embed lessons learned from previous projects. So Portrush Railway Station was running 6 months behind the North-West Transport Hub. And one of the things they done well was integration of design. And this was, I'm not going to lie, problematic from start to end for the contractor. Because as a client, we wanted this integrated design now because it was bespoke with integrated lighting, and it was complementary materials to sit alongside the Grade B listed building. So basically it looked good compared to our original platforms. And to be specific, we can't really see on the middle picture, you can kind of see there, this rust coloured Swiss pearl. It scratches easily, hard to handle, and bespoke joinery needed. And then this really did the building justice. However, making the canopy work, we had to step around the building, we had to integrate the M&E services, bespoke down pipes. So as a construction team and a delivery team, we really had to work together to make something very clunky from a joinery and construction point of view, but look elegant at the very end. So it's not just a building project in phase 1 as well. It was there was a lot of PWay, which is track works, and S&T works, which was delivered by Babcock. So the PWay was Romberg Sersha and the S&T was Babcock. We had 1.8 kilometres of new track to lay. There was 6,000 metres cubes of spoil, 6,500 metres cube of new ballast. We had safe cess walkways, which runs up beside the track for future maintainers, and cable troughing throughout the length. We had quite a significant number of new S&C points installed by Babcock. We had PSP and relay rooms, so you just can't see, but they're sitting to the right-hand side of that photo. And we used a one-train working to try and utilise and get works carried out within a very tight time frame. But what's interesting in this project is this whole project was completed without any engineering trains, all materials by road, and one access point over a very long, narrow constrained site. And it was delivered with 0 minutes overrun, and therefore no further impact on the railway operations. So you could say, how did we do this? So forward planning is always key when you're carrying out your PWay and your S&T works. It's very important that we book and agree blockades with our NIR colleagues, and they were embedded into the contracts. And one of the main blockades was in October 2019. So this where we had 12 days prior to opening to cut the old PWay into the station, basically no turning back, and put in the last piece of the jigsaw, the new PWay that connects into the hub. And that connects into the platform, the island platform that Gary pointed out earlier, where I actually had the capacity for a 9-car set if needed for future in Translink. Babcock completed and commissioned the S&T elements successfully and handed over Translink on time, on programme at 5:30 in the morning on the 14th of October 2020. And to put this into context, testing and commissioning is a key to the success of our railway system. It's the heart, it's what makes it work. And Babcock had a total of 60 test logs that was raised and closed. Then at this point, as a project manager, I had to then coordinate 5 days of driver training, which started at 6:30 every morning. So this was every driver, every conductor taken through for testing, commissioning, and also the decamp from the old to the new in order for us to be ready. And there's just some more further photos of showing the precast platform walls and the PWay works. Precast, also great from speed, but also once we do the testing commissioning, we have to make sure from an interoperability that your structural gauging is all correct and that it's compliant to legislation. Also part of the project that was delivered by Farrens, the Civils Works, is we had to work with Derry Strabane District Council as well. I suppose it's seen as a little package too, as we refer to it as the Greenway. So this is basically, it's a multimodal project. So this is the connectivity up to the Embedding Barracks existing Greenway, and linking basically the station to the existing greenways that we have. On the left-hand side photo, you can see there the doors that run straight out from the waiting and the concourse area of the station out onto the greenway, and then the picture on the right is what runs along the track the whole way up. So it's a very quick whistle-stop tour around the construction of phase 1. But on the left, I think you can see what Gary had showed him on the previous is what was before we started works in October 2018. And in October 2019, it's what we handed over. Farrens, obviously, we're working right up to the clock for operational readiness, which is the 21st of October 2019. And I suppose like Farrens had carried out a lot of the structural works, steel frames, needle beams, etc. But I suppose the key part as well was, you know, the functionality of the building is what makes it work, like the S&T, the M&E that goes into it, but it's the look and the feel at the end is what the public and the customer focus. So this was quite key as well. So what you see on October 2019, we had a series of artistic pieces have been integrated to engage the passenger experience. And this includes elements of the heritage of railway of the city to highlight the connection with the Greenway, and also a nod to this past heritage with the North Wall, with key focus on the railway past. This also really helped blend the old and new from the natural materials such as timber has seen in the integrated map, and blend naturally against the yellow exposed brickwork that was sandblasted back. One thing I would say is also that this was the importance of integrating programs. So we had to run an artwork and the consultation program in Q2 and Q3 of 2019, along with the main works program. So they work seamlessly to meet that key date you see at the top of the screen of the 21st of October. And one of the successes of this is the community space. From opening to when COVID hit, we had a series of events from Halloween to Christmas, choir, yoga, Simon Community, Children in Crossfire, Foil Search and Rescue have all been using this space. And in that space, there's floor boxes that, you know, you've got power and water, etc. that you can use. And it's become an integral part of the city. And I think as Paul takes us through at a later time, you'll see more of the internal and external finishes. And I just want to thank you for your time. And I pass you now to my colleague, Paul Denvir, who will take you through phase 2.
Thanks very much for that, Lisa. Thanks, Gary, for a comprehensive overview of the pre-construction, and Katherine for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to run through the construction phase 2. My name is Paul Denvir. I took over as project manager on the North-West Hub project. When Lisa went on to Pastors New, took over basically at the end of the phase 1 construction works, which was the building, and then I took over for the phase 2 works, which I'm just going to have a quick run through now. First slide here is just the scope of works for phase 2. So I think Gary's alluded to a lot of it in the rundown through the project brief scope. But phase 2 included the new bus turning circle, bus stand area for a minimum of 3 park coaches. You'll see all of this in the slides later on. There's also the passenger set down area and collection area, taxi rank spaces. You'll see from later slides that one of the big problems with the old train station was that space was at a premium, and buses and taxis would struggle, as Gary was saying, to turn, when dropping customers off. So this project was to bring all that together and integrate the bus and taxi and all the travel with the new hub. The junction at the Duke Street roundabout was also reconfigured as part of phase 2. You'll see that in the later slides also, just to make it more accessible for persons coming in to use the park and ride, and also to make the bus manoeuvres easier coming off the Duke Street. With the new park and ride facility then that we created, was constructed with 100 bays, and this included 4 number e-charging bays and 6 accessible parking bays. We also included in there a small area for motorcycles for parking those up too. We also included the completion of the public groundworks. This included the cycleway link to the south of the city, as Gary had alluded to earlier. A good amount of seating and also landscaping, just to make the area more attractive to the public, and not just a train station here. It's a public hub, multimodal hub, and we want to just bring people into the area, even if they're not there to use the services, just to use the area as an open space for people to gather. The first more job of the phase 2, I suppose I should have had that at the top, was the demolition of the old station, including the existing platform canopies and associated infrastructure. This was just to make way for the new turning area for the buses. And then also just one of the interdependencies was the River Fovle wall works. So this was separately funded by DFI. I think Gary had said earlier that the project was funded by the European Union mostly, but there was wall strengthening works that were funded also by DFI. So we brought that into the main contractor works prior to the appointment of the principal contractor, just to make the coordination a lot easier. And that meant that we transferred the risk to the contractor of coordinating the 3 works packages. And the 3 works packages were the main works package, the Greenway that Gary and Lisa discussed earlier, and then this river wall project. Just moving on to the next slide. So this picture was taken from a drone towards the end, possibly a week before handover of phase 1. And you can just see here on the left hand side, we've got a piling rig which is carrying out the river wall works. In here, where there's a lot of activity, is the park and ride construction. You can see out the front of the station we're still completing some of the public groundworks, laying paving slabs and putting seating in. I think it was a Herculean effort, so to speak, from Lisa and the team to have the station open on the day it was planned for from the conception of the project. So you can see here there's still quite a lot of work to do, just a couple of weeks before opening. But fair play to the guys that got it ready and open for the October deadline. Over on this side is the old station. You can't really see it, just the corner there, and this is where the new bus turning circle eventually ended up. And it was the crossover from phase 1 and phase 2 here, where there was a lot of interdependencies within the project. Just moving on then, just as the phase 2 progressed, you can see here some of the challenges we faced with the construction. So in here we've got the construction of the bus turning area. We also have the public realm area where they're laying paving slabs the whole way up, and the river wall. We'll have the upstand river wall that was placed on top of the cantilever piles, 350 of which were put in at the start of phase 2. Then in the background here we have the taxi drop-off and set-down area. You've got the park and ride further on down, and you can see here we have the road coming in off the Duke Street roundabout. We had quite a number of businesses that we needed to remain, the road needed to remain open for. You can see we have public walkways. We've got guys carrying out works on the roundabout. So there was quite a few challenges to consider when keeping a live operational environment running while you're trying to complete a project. Just moving on to the next picture. This is the park and ride. Just the tarmac getting laid. You can see we're starting to finish off a lot of the landscaping in the area. Lighting columns that went in, but also at the same time we had to keep the railway line live for the whole of phase 2. It wasn't closed at all, so We had some possessions on the line. We moved the train over to the opposite side of the platform to allow us to take possessions, just to finish off fencing and the like along the side of the line 1. This is just a slide showing the old station layout. You can see the clutter with regards to parking and cars, and this ramp here is where the buses used to come in and set down the passengers using the station. They used to come across an uncontrolled crossing into the old station, so we just wanted to improve the whole area and make it more accessible for buses, taxis, and just take away the clutter from the front of the station. And then also, as Gary alluded to earlier, remove the disconnect from the river foil and bring it back into play. And then I think you can see on the right hand side picture here, this is a picture taken from the 2nd floor of the new station. You can see the buses have a large set down area. You've got covered bus shelters. You've got a taxi rank, and you can see a taxi just parked here. And then the whole public realm area and the river foil just brought completely back into play, which I think's a great asset for the Waterside of the city. So this is just a picture showing the completed works. Sorry, I can't do anything about the weather. I think the location sort of dictates what the weather is. So, but you can see here the bus drop-off area, the taxi set down, public realm area with seating at the front of the station, and then we've got the park and ride, and obviously the refurbished station, and then the platforms. So you can see here the river wall works also. At the minute we're actually cladding the back of the wall just to make it more appealing to people from the other side of the river. So just to move on, project completion, some key lessons learned from all phases of the project. I think the most important thing was a good collaborative working. I'm just worried of the time here actually, so it's 7:30, but if you can, it's worthwhile holding on, because we've got a nice video and a virtual tour of the station we're going to show you just after this. I've only got probably a couple of minutes left of the presentation. So key lessons learned were collaborative working, key stakeholder cooperation approach to project delivery. So Lisa and Gary have alluded to the fact that we work closely with the Derry and Strabane District Council in the delivery of the Greenway, and by all accounts it's been a massive success story for the Waterside area of the city. The target for the Derry and Strabane Council for yearly footfall on the Greenway was 50,000 journeys. At the minute we're forecasting well over 250,000 journeys, so a 5-fold increase on what was expected. So I think the collaborative working with the key stakeholders was a massive success in the project. Project procurement, so principal integrated the design team appointed to deliver overall project design. I think Gary alluded to this earlier. Matt McDonald were over most of the design and coordinated everything very well. Procurement project again, principal contractor was appointed with inclusion of the PWay contractor. Again, this de-risked contractor interdependencies. And then the principal contractor then was responsible for coordination of all the site works, including the S&T. And then again, the works packages combined within one principal contractor appointment to reduce the delivery risk. Technical approval for highway structure, so TAS approval. We've taken a lesson that we should consider this quite earlier in projects nowadays, because it did run on a bit into phase 2 of the project. Contract management then, contracts to consider future world events such as COVID and mechanisms of dealing with this. So obviously in halfway through or towards the end of phase 2, COVID showed its ugly head in March 2020 and put a stop to the works for approximately 6 weeks. But the contractor went away and developed plans for a COVID-safe site. And after the 6 weeks, we came back onto the ground. Took another 2 weeks just to make the site safe. and then continued on with the works with the programme reconfigured to take into account the COVID restrictions. So the handover date for completion was end of August 2020, and we managed to get it handed over and delivered for November 2020, which I think was a testament to all, including the contractor firms, who did well in completing the job in strange and difficult times. Then the stakeholder engagement. So the public event space was a resounding success. So Lisa spoke about it earlier, that we've had many public events, many people come and use the event space. We had Halloween, Easter, Christmas events. We've had yoga sessions, bike surgeries. We actually had planned for May 2020 the City of Derry's Mayor's Tea Dance, which had to be cancelled due to COVID, but hopefully things get back up and running, we'll bring that back in again. And then lastly there in the lessons learned is the business case. So commercial units that we had let it out have struggled with the COVID, but hopefully they'll come back when the station opens up again. And then the tenant letting space was a huge success. So we filled the upper floors of the station with a fire engineer dual group, and they have been received well. And actually we've struck up a relationship with dual group, and we're starting to utilise them in some of our projects. So as Gary had said earlier, we're going to have a short video here, just a fly through of the project, which Rob's going to do for me now at the minute, and I'll just talk through the video as it goes through. So this is the existing Greenway that we tied into, the Greenway that we got the money from the Strabane District Council. You can see here that the two lines coming in, the passing loop, which goes out to line 1 and 2. This is the Peace Bridge, so now I got connection to the opposite side of the city side, and also the other side, and we've got our Greenway, which we just see coming in a second. This is where the new Greenway ties in, and makes that connection from the south side of the city, the Great Bridge. The Greenway is quite well used. Earlier, 20,000 journeys are really effective. I think this is close to 30,000 per month. So basically it's free to the city, the council, involved. You can see here the island platform from the view and the canopies that we can help. We've got the parkway here. We've also got the PWay storage area, and again working tonight. Just here you see the river wall which runs all the way along the top through the whole site, and the wall, the river wall is still in place. It was actually quite damaged, so we could tile wall it. You can see the drop-off area here, the taxis, and the delivery, and then also the drop-off here, and then also the south side of the building. Just coming around from the building, you'll see the station square, back end of the S&P equipment, the relay building and the generator. Okay, so this is the virtual walkthrough that we had commissioned. It's quite impressive. You can see we're at the front of the station here. It's a 360 rotational view of the station. So we can see the new curtain wall, the frontage of the station. Look up, you can see the clock tower. You can also see the active travel centre and all the nice brickwork we've brought into play. Public realm area, station square seating. Lots of seating all around. Trying to bring people into the area. If we click inside the building, these buttons. So this is the cafe area, and we've got a tenant in here growing coffee. So obviously not used at the minute, but hopefully we can promote the space. This is not just for railway users, and try and bring in business for obviously the tenants and just people interested in the station, because it is a lovely place to go and meet. If we go further up the concourse here, you can see the changing places that Lisa talked about. I'll let the camera catch up. We've also got the toilets, ticketing desk. If we go on through the station, you can see the planters that you could see on Gary's design earlier, with some artwork in behind. Also, you can have a good view of the roof. Original clock from the station that was kindly donated to us by an ex-TransLink employee, and then also some of the artwork that we had commissioned on the walls. I mean, I'm not sure how well this has come across, but you'll see that the interactive VR is quite good. You can read the signage and the artwork. We'll run share this with anyone who wants it out there. Will always kindly be able to do that with us. I'll just take you outside the building, out to the platforms. You can see here, this is just the platform 1. You see the great view of the river that Gary was talking about, bringing everything back into play. Beast Bridge, park and ride, great view of the city. Yeah, just an overall great project, and I think that virtual run through will give you a very good idea of it. So we'll definitely share that with you, so you can have a look and play around yourselves. Okay, I'm just going to hand back to Katherine then for a Q&A session if people are still with us.
Well, thank you everybody for a great presentation. That was fascinating, and I do realise we had a few sound problems at the start, but I think we were able to hear okay. It just buffered slightly at times. We've quite a few questions in, and I appreciate we're over time, but we'll do our best to run through those between myself and Brendan Harkin handling them. We have quite a few just thank yous and lovely projects from people, so I'm passing that on as well. Let me go through these then. One question from Ellen was, what was the business need and benefits case, and has the measurement of benefits started already? Who would like to take that? Maybe Gary? Okay.
Yeah, in terms of there was a benefits realisation plan carried out that was submitted as part of the outline business case. So it was looking at various things like, creating a public transport facility that was fit for modern day passengers and the requirements of multimodal transport hubs, and that was able to future proof the growth that we are always aspiring to within TransLink. We were also then looking at things like, bringing a well-known historic monument back into sort of modern day standards. As I mentioned earlier, it was actually registered on the Buildings at Risk register. So, Yeah, there was a lot of benefits identified. Just I don't have the benefits realization plan here just to hand, but yeah, we've started measuring a lot of those benefits that formed part of the overall business case.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. I know you'll have covered some of it already, but how did you manage balancing the needs and requirements of the various funders and stakeholders and programme board members? The asker here, Rob Gray, says, I imagine they all had different views on what the project outputs were or should be.
Yes, there was. Well, in terms of the overall programme board, that was set up as sort of ran through earlier, just the overall sort of time frame for the scheme. And if you remember, we set up the overall programme board very early on. So it was very clear to everybody sitting at that level exactly what it was, we needed the project to deliver. And even to the likes of the project brief, again, that was shared amongst all of the programme board members. And everybody had signed up to it. So we knew exactly there was a lot of time spent in actually sort of nailing down the overall scope and knowing exactly what it was that the project was to deliver. As we moved on, then there was a lot of different views and opinions on the design, and there were people who felt quite strong about whether the train should come back into the station and things like that. So yeah, there was a lot of opinion around that. So during the design stage and when we had the planning, and it was a matter of trying to communicate with people as best we could and convincing people that the design that we ended up with and the product is really that Paul has shown there is the best for the city. And moving forward. So
Gary,
yeah.
also I noticed during one of your presentations there was a lot of consultation done, and there was a very high percentage of positive feedback.
That's right. There was a huge amount of consultation done, Katherine. Yeah. As I say, there was two formal all singing, all dancing public consultations done. And then to support that, there was an awful lot of other stakeholder engagement events where, we met with political parties, we met with various groups, we met with the council. We were good enough to facilitate a few meetings with some of the local groups up around the city and the area. We presented to various committees within the council in both Derry City Council, and we also presented down in Strabane as well. And we held events in Fovle Street bus station. We held events in Lisney Gilden and St Colum's House Park. So yeah, there was a huge amount of consultation done just to sort of try and bring everybody along with the overall journey. So you get a great understanding of what it was we were trying to achieve within the project, even at times when they didn't necessarily agree with maybe, the design of the overall scheme.
That's great, Gary. And Rob also notes that he delivered a similar heritage rail project, and it brought it back to him. Ashok has taken a lot of interest in the project and has a few queries. I think some of them were answered during the presentation, such as how you finished on schedule or very close to schedule. Ashok also asks, what were the issues with the first option that was discarded, and did the second option cost more? Is that something you can answer, Gary?
Yeah, in terms of the two options, as I was saying during the presentation, option one, taking the trains inside, was the very first option that we looked at. And it just became very evident during that stage that it just wasn't delivering for us all that we had noted within the requirements of the project. There was a lot of technical issues around the whole design, but as well as that, there was also, as I say, issues just with, we couldn't physically get the accommodation schedule, if you like, within the listed structure itself. So we were going to have to extend and the building and look at eating up other space within the site. The actual technical requirements as well to bring the railway line in now, because of the difference that there was now in railway design, we couldn't possibly have designed the track and platforms to the same standards as you'd seen in that first photograph that I put in there. So in order to comply with railway design, we were going to have to reclaim part of the river Fovle to get the railway track to the curvature that we were permitted to take it to. So there was a huge amount of civil engineering associated with that. So yeah, I think it was quite, the design that we ended up going with when everything was appraised was just, it offered so much more in terms of passengers. And as you see from the images there, that's an internal heated space with the planter, so people can use the full facilities. You can sit inside, have your coffee, read your paper, whatever, in a nice warm heated space, and see the train arriving in through the various
Gary,
windows.
I can't wait to get down there with my cycling group and use the Greenway and have a coffee and everything, all in good time.
Yeah.
But I see now it's almost 10 to 8, so we do have a lot of questions in. I hope we can circulate answers to those questions after the event, because we can't possibly cover them all. There is one here about, was there remediation of chemical contamination at all in the project?
There was, yes. As I was showing just on one of the first slides that I presented, where it was, if you remember, it was the aerial shot of the existing facilities on the site, where it's showing the old S&T relay room, and there was an old tank farm beside that where trains used to be filled with diesel. So yeah, we did a lot of work with that with Mark McDonald. We carried out a number of SI site investigations throughout the overall site, and then we honed in on that particular area, and then Mark McDonald and ourselves did a lot of work then in setting targets and things with NIEA and putting that into the contract, where foreigners then had to engage their specialists, and they went in and treated the ground contamination fairly early on. Well, it was meant to be within phase 2, but they actually brought that forward within phase 1, and started treating that early on. So yeah, we did have to deal with it, and there was issues associated with that, but we were aware of them early on, and it worked out okay first then in the end.
That's brilliant. As I say, we have other questions in, but I think given that we have run over time a little, I'm going to wrap up and say goodnight to everybody. So just to summarise, our next event is from the APM Northern Ireland branch, is about Northern Ireland Water project, and it's called SWELL, and it is on next week, Wednesday the 21st in the evening, and it's bookable through the APM website. I want to thank everybody for a great presentation and a very, very interesting project. Gary McCluskey, Lisa McFadden, Paul Denvir, Brendan Harkin from the committee for setting it up, Rob and Katherine at APM HQ, and I'm sure I've forgotten to thank somebody, so thank you all, and thank you for attending and for being patient with us running slightly over. The video and the recording will be available afterwards, and we will endeavour to answer all of your questions. So I'm just going to say thank you and good night, everybody.